NCBI Labs. Well, this week on our NCBI Labs live event, we have something a bit different for you. Over the last few months, you might have noticed that we've had more and more guests on our live events. And we've been delighted to be able to interview a great variety of people who've been involved in developing all sorts of apps or different technologies to assist the sight loss community. It's really been great to see how they've been able to help make the world around us that bit more accessible. Well, our guest today works with an organisation that you wouldn't necessarily associate straight away with accessibility technology, but in a way they've taken an interest in a different kind of accessibility. And actually it isn't just the world around us that they want to make more accessible, so to speak, but far beyond, in fact. Since its foundation in 1958, NASA has been responsible for the Apollo missions, the Voyager spacecrafts and the various Mars rovers, as well as numerous other projects as well. So we're delighted that this week in our live event, we're going to be talking to NASA technician Craig Moore, and he's going to be telling us a little bit about his role at NASA, as well as how technology has helped him overcome the challenges associated with sight loss at an early age. So that's something I'm sure you'd agree is going to be very interesting. That's coming up in about 10 minutes time or so. Later on as well, we're going to hear some more quick tips as usual. Quick tips that you'll be able to use on your Android or iOS phone to get the most out of its accessibility settings. This week we'll be focusing on the various reading controls and gestures that you can use there on VoiceOver and Talkback. We're also going to have our tech help section a little bit later that's going to focus on what to do if you have maybe two different screen readers getting in each other's way on your computer and you're hearing both of those voices. What can you do if that's happening? Well, all of that is coming up a little bit later on. Of course, don't forget to get your question in for your questions in for Craig as well. You can do that on the right hand side of your screen if you're connecting live through Microsoft Teams, or you can drop us a line at labs@ncbi.ie. And just a reminder before we go any further, that if you want to catch up with any of our previous live events, you can do that on YouTube or on any of the major podcast platforms as well. Now, to start us off today, we have our regular Meet the Team section. And this week we'll be talking to one of the first people I met actually when I started working with NCBI some years ago. Maureen Lanigan, you're very welcome to the show this week.
Jude, hello. It's lovely to be here and thank you for inviting me now to take part in today's live event.
It's great to have you on. That was a real back in the day moment, Maureen, there when I was thinking about how long we've known each other actually is going back a number of years. How long have you been with NCBI and where are you based, Maureen, just for our listeners?
Well, I started work with NCBI very similar to my colleague Brian, who you spoke with there the other week. I started in 2001 and I cannot believe that is just 20 years ago. The time has gone so quickly. I was appointed as the Southeast Regional IT Trainer, and that involved covering IT work with service users in the counties of Carlow, Kilkenny, South Tipperary, Waterford and Wexford. And although my office is actually based in Wexford town, I very much work out of the other NCBI offices in the Southeast region, and those offices are based in Carlow, Kilkenny and Waterford. Very
good. And tell us, with your background then before NCBI, were you already involved in training or support, or what was your background before NCBI?
Okay, well, yes and no. Yes, I was involved in a number of things before taking up duty with NCBI. I had worked for many years in the public sector, and I also worked for a significant number of years in adult education. But my very first intro to technology was when I was 12. My parents bought my sister and myself a portable typewriter one Christmas. And we just loved it. Now, I have to say my parents gave us a great start in life. Now, they were really kind of foreseeing or far-seeing, if you like, of skills that would stand to us. So we both anyway learned to type, but I mean that would be the old way of saying it today. I suppose I'd say that we developed our keyboard skills. But anyway, typing was, and I just loved typing from day one. And that was when my intro and my love of technology kind of started. So when I started work, the high-tech equipment in the office that I was first based in was an ink duplicator and a manual typewriter. So you're talking about going back in the day, Jude. I'm going way back in the day. And then that subsequently let the manual typewriter in due course broke down, solid pounding on the keyboard with it. And I went to the dizzy heights. I got a golf ball typewriter. I don't know if many of your listeners have ever had the pleasure or enjoyment of working on a golf ball typewriter.
What's the golf ball typewriter?
What's the golf ball typewriter? Well, instead of the manual typewriter having the kind of the keys that would tap off the platen as you typed along, this literally had a circular device in it. It was electronic, and it had all of the letters and all of the punctuation symbols, and it was the shape of a golf ball. So as you typed a letter or letters, this little golf ball was whirring around in size, and my goodness, the racket that it made, it was so let me tell you, I was there now at the start, as to say. So after starting work anyway, my parents, they had always encouraged us to update skills and go on to further education. So I went on then to learn how to use a computer as they were starting to come in, and obviously that led to learning about computer applications, and I got to grips with word processing and spreadsheets and presentations and database and email and internet and all of those wonderful things that were coming online. And I went on then and gained my qualifications to teach all of those subjects. And that then led me on to become very much involved in delivering the ECDL programs, the European Computer Driving Licence programs, and providing customised training courses, computer courses, which I was involved in for many years. And I have to say, I've just been very lucky throughout my working life. I've always loved the jobs that I've been in. I've always had great colleagues, as I have now with NCBI, and it's always been great teamwork and great working with all the jobs that I've had. So that kind of brings my background up to speed and where I am now today.
Yeah, very good. So just kind of talking about your role with NCBI, obviously your background then had those elements of education and technology in there. What's your role been? What's your regular role been, should we say, with NCBI since then?
Okay, well, regular kind of went out the window about this time 12 months ago. As it did for everybody and for all of our lives, and we're looking forward, as I do say now, that when I hear this thing of vaccines being rolled out and that sort of thing, to me it's very much like it's the cavalry coming over the hill. I'm just thinking it's great. We've got kind of the end of that tunnel is in sight, and we're coming to a part where we can get back to being regular and doing what we're doing. So you asked me anyway, what was my work with NCBI involved? Well, the first thing I'd say, first and foremost, is teamwork. And as I've mentioned to you there, I work with wonderful colleagues. I mean, I'm based here in the Southeast. All of my colleagues are a superb team. I'm part of the IT trainers team. All of my colleagues there are just excellent in terms of support and camaraderie. I can't thank everybody enough now for everybody's only a phone call away. If we have a question, a query, we need support. But the work, I suppose, has so evolved over the past 20 years as to when I started back in 2001. And that's all because of the ongoing developments in technology. I mean, I remember when I first started with NCBI, I used a reading machine. And the reading machine in those days was about 2 feet wide. It was surely a foot high and about 12 inches long, or 12 to 18 inches long. Yeah. It had significant weight, so you weren't easily going to bring it from the kitchen to the sitting room to the coffee table type thing. And the cost of it was in around £5,000. back 20 years ago. So, you know, you're talking significant cost and size, and but I mean, that was the height of technology at the time. And now I think of it, we have a device that fits in the palm of our hands. It could be a smartphone, it could be a tablet, and you have a little app, a small program on it, which chances are has come free of charge, free of cost. And that does as much and possibly a whole lot more than what our big massive reading machine did back in the 20 years ago. So that's really where my intro to my work and where I see it's come from and where it is developed. When we talk about the work that I actually do, I provide IT training and support to our Ncbi service users. I do that on a one-to-one basis, on an individual basis, and I also do it on a group basis. And the training and support covers a wide range of assistive hardware and software. Now, when I say assistive hardware, this can range from, say, using a computer or a laptop or an iPad or a tablet or a smartphone. And when we get to smartphones, they tend, as we know, to fall into two buckets or two brackets. You have your iOS, which is your Apple, and you have your Android, which is Samsung and Huawei and Sony and all of those. And then also the providing training and support in the programs that we use on all of that equipment, be it apps or Microsoft Word, or it could be the assistive software, such as our screen reading programs like JAWS and Narrator and NVDA, or our magnification programs like Windows Magnifier, Zoom Text, Supernova. I'd also provide training and facilitate individual reviews of the equipment such as portable digital magnifiers, CCTVs, reading machines, and all of that work, all of that support and training, and that it's all really, the bottom line is all to be able to help the person who that I'm working with and who is reviewing the items, to help them to determine what is the best solution for their own individual needs. And when it comes to, we'll say, the training, as I mentioned to you, I do one-to-one training, and that is primarily either in Ncbi centres, which will be in the southeast, it's the Wexford and the Waterford and the Carlow and Kilkenny, or pre-COVID, it would have been and could have been home-based. But the training, wherever the location is, the training is always customised to the individual need. It's what's generally termed person-centred planning, and it's really for the person to identify where they wish to go with the training, what they wish to get out of it, and I'm there to provide that connection to ensure that they get the most from it. And that, when I mentioned there about tablets and smartphones, it can also be, I'm also involved in assisting somebody maybe to perhaps modify the settings on their own individual devices. Because be it tablets or smartphones, there's always going to be an ease of access section where somebody might like to tweak a font to a certain height, or they might like it's the screen to be put into dark mode, and customize it to each. So as Brendan Grace would have said, like it's not a question of one size fits all. It's a question of one size fits some, but we tailor it to suit each individual in that.
Absolutely. And there's a lot involved in that. What way would you say that since COVID, because you mentioned there a couple of times, obviously, the impact that COVID has had on it, what way has your role changed maybe over the last year? What are you involved in now that maybe you wouldn't have been beforehand?
Well, when you say about COVID having changed things, Jude, the only way I could describe it is that not only has my role changed and all of our roles, but basically life as we know it has been turned upside down since this time last year with coronavirus and with COVID. I'm still delivering training. It's still on a one-to-one basis. It's still in group, but it is very much via remote connections. And it's certainly brought it home, I think, to all of us, how critical and how essential it is to have a good broadband connection these days, because anything remote, anything, as soon as you preface anything with remote, it has to be broadband based. and remote anything or network, whatever, has to be good signal. So that's one of the key things of the change in the last 12 months. My colleague Colin, you interviewed Colin there, I think a couple of weeks back.
Yeah.
He had mentioned about Ncbi as an organisation had rolled out or had been just in the process of our digital transformation. And somebody had great foresight with that, because that certainly enabled all of myself and my IT trainer colleagues to keep in place the training and the remote support that we were doing, because we were very much able to work with our Windows 10 laptops, our work mobile phones, TeamViewer software. So it's not quite the same as being with the person that you're working with or the person that you're training with. But in these times when social distancing is of paramount importance, it certainly is the next best thing to being physically present to somebody. Because it's always something that I'm aware of, that learning is very much a personal experience. Learning and training is very much a personal experience, and that the participant will engage with the trainer equally as much as what the trainer will engage with the participant. Yeah. And there's a quote from Benjamin Franklin, which I always kind of think is so very, very true, even though it's going back so very, very far. Mm. And he said, "Tell me and I forget. Teach me and I remember. But involve me and I learn." And I think that's where, as IT trainers and our role in changing that, we involve our participants and whoever that we work with, and that's where the learning process. So it's all challenging. It's all challenging on both sides, training and learning and participating. But we're all, as I say, muddling through it together, and we're getting there. And we may well be seeing a time when we'll be back to working more so on the one-to-one individual basis. Another aspect, just before I finish, on where I see other developments and how the role has changed, I see there's become a greater interest in the whole audiobook accessibility, and that Ncbi Overdrive has always provided audiobooks to our participants, and of course these are available now to download or via a portable device, be it say an iPhone or a mobile phone, a smartphone. And also the county councils with their Borrow Box app has enabled audiobooks and audiobook websites to become much more accessible to people. And I've found there's been very much so in the last 12 months a far greater interest in sites like that, and training and learning how to use them, because we're in level 5 restrictions and will be for the next while, is what we all enjoy, and they are relatively easy to access. So I suppose I would encourage anybody who is listening to this either live now today or who tunes into it on the podcast at a later time. I would encourage anyone that if you have any interest in individual training in whatever area, PC related, tablet related, app related, whatever, audiobooks, that sort of thing, please do reach out and contact Ncbi Labs, and rest assured your query, your inquiry, your interest will be followed up on. And there's always a trainer in all of the country, in all the different regions, that will be available to provide support and training for the individual.
Brilliant. Yeah, very good. Well, thank you very much for talking to us today, Maureen, and great to add that extra little bit of class in there, a Benjamin Franklin quote as well. I mean, that's just taking the biscuit for the interview. Thanks for joining us, Maureen. Great to catch up with you as well.
Well, Jude, it has been a lovely chit chat and great to have caught up with you, and thank you for having invited me. And I'm really looking forward now to hearing your next interview now with Craig. NASA, here we come.
Absolutely, yeah, that's it. That's our tagline from now on. NASA, here we come. Excellent. Thank you very much, Maureen. Good to chat to you.
My pleasure. Bye-bye, Jude.
Take care. Very good. So our thanks to Maureen Lanigan there on Meet the Team. Just a reminder before we move on that if you do want to ask a question throughout the show, you can send us an email at labs@ncbi.ie, or use the question panel on the right hand side of the screen if you're using Microsoft Teams. Now, as we said earlier, for the next part of the show, we're delighted to have with us NASA technician Craig Moore. You're very welcome, Craig.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
And I appreciate you joining us all the way from Washington, I believe, today, isn't it?
No, actually, I'm in northern Alabama. NASA has.
Ah, wow. Okay, very good. We're really traveling the world on our live events. Very good. It's not every week that we get to talk to someone from NASA, so we're really looking forward to this. So maybe, Craig, just to get us started, can you give us a bit of an idea of how you got involved with NASA and maybe how long you've been working with them?
Yes, I was extremely fortunate. After I got my doctorate degree, I had a temporary job as a postdoctoral fellow at the University of Tennessee in Knoxville, Tennessee. And there was a fellow there who was a graduate student. His father worked at this particular center where I'm located, and it's really through speaking with him and through his assistance that I was able to get employed here. And I've been with NASA. It's hard to believe I've been here 32 years. Doesn't seem possible.
Yeah, very good. And what was it that you studied? What was your area of expertise, did you say?
My area was chemistry. I did computer modeling of chemistry using programs for quantum mechanics. And I was very fortunate because those programs were developed in the 60s in Fortran. And of course, it's before all this graphic user interface stuff was around. So running the programs and reading them was extremely accessible to me back in the days when you're using DOS computers and braille displays, and I wasn't using speech at all at that time.
Yeah.
So I was extremely fortunate.
Yeah, I'd imagine. And was that where you kind of went in straight away with NASA? What sort of roles have you had during your time there?
Well, the first half of my career, I did work in chemistry. I did computer modeling of specialized optical materials, and they were, and then later on when the agency, that was during the days of, I was hired in '89, so during that time, a lot of emphasis was still on the shuttle and whatever science experimentation people could do as part of it. And then as NASA shifted toward developing new rockets and the idea of going to Mars, the agency, at our center, they closed down this particular science directorate that I was involved in. There's still some science being done at my center, but the emphasis went more towards developing technology. So then I moved to an engineering department, and in this department, people are writing software and monitoring sensors on the rocket to make sure that it's safe. And if there are some problems, sometimes you can get information from other centers. Sometimes there are actions you can take to mitigate, to solve the problem. And other times, if it's severe enough, then you, of course, have to terminate the mission. There'd be things like temperatures and pressures in fuel tanks, if the spacecraft tumbles in a way that it can't be recovered, just a lot of different scenarios, things like that.
Yeah. It sounds like the sort of work where I'm not sure if you'd agree with this. Is it something where maybe the working for NASA sort of sounds very imaginative and really interesting all the time, but I would imagine there's a lot of detailed work that really takes a lot of kind of concentration and just sticking with it day to day as well. Would that be right?
Oh, you're absolutely right. I mean, there are aspects of it that some people do that are extremely creative, but there is a grind, a level to detail, and especially when you're considering safety concerns, it's just people can never pay too much attention to detail, and the problem comes when people get habituated to something. Well, this doesn't work quite right, and lo and behold, it was a serious problem. And,
Yeah, absolutely. So can you tell us a bit more just about kind of how direct would your involvement with missions have been, maybe in the lead up to launches or throughout the duration of a mission, for example?
Really not at all. There was, with one exception, there was I guess there were one or two shuttle missions that carried aboard some of the materials that I had done background work on. And some of these materials, it's important to be able to grow very large, perfect crystals. And of course, an environment in space is ideal for that, because when you're growing these crystals on Earth, it's a very slow, gradual process. You have heating, uneven heating and cooling, so you have currents that are in the fluid, and it may be very slow currents, but they limit the size of the crystals and introduce air defects in them. And in space, you can grow much larger ones, and with fewer defects.
Yeah, very interesting. And so that was kind of one that maybe you had more direct involvement in. Would you be able to tell us about maybe some of the missions that your work might have been kind of tied into? Maybe it wasn't such a direct link, but that your work would have been kind of involved in.
Well, these were shuttle missions that this applied to. But later on, the work I'm doing that I've done with the branch now is they're writing software for the SLS rocket that's being developed. And now I've kind of shifted my role a little bit. I'm monitoring, like a technical monitor for a lot of small business grants where they're developing new technologies for future efforts. And a lot of this deals with using artificial intelligence for life support systems. For instance, in the space station, I believe it takes about 40 man-hours per week to run the life support systems, and with more sophisticated software, with there's a lunar gateway, which is a small space station that's being developed that will circle the moon, probably sometime in the late 20s. And there they hope to get that 40-hour time down to 4 hours or less, and it will free people to do other types of work.
Yeah, very interesting. It's really interesting hearing about. Obviously, we don't get much of an opportunity to be having these kind of conversations week to week, but it's great to have somebody from NASA on the program. But obviously, we're kind of talking about specifically a connection with sight loss here as well. So, would you be able to tell us maybe a little bit about your experience of sight loss?
Yes. I had extremely limited vision until I was 7. I was born 3 months prematurely I'm not young. I was born in 1957, and I was given too much oxygen in the incubator, and that knowledge was not widely known. It was probably known in some larger metropolitan areas, but I grew up in a rural area in the state of North Dakota, which borders Canada. And so anyway, at age 7, I lost my sight. I started using Braille from the beginning. I was in a school that was mainstreamed. It's not quite like today where students are staying in the schools, whatever districts they're in. This was a school that received students from, probably about a 100-mile radius, and had a marvelous education, had great resource teachers that helped, with learning Braille, and I was encouraged with. I'm amazed at the things they had to do. They were putting Braille in, foreign languages and math and science, and it was just incredible. I was really encouraged by the teachers I had. I had a great chemistry teacher in high school, and I think in general people in science are curious and they look at things as problem solving, and I have always been encouraged by people. I've never really met any resistance. And so I think that's, I've actually known people that were blind in other fields that received a lot more resistance than I did. And while any serious study takes effort, they had less technological difficulties because the notations, what they were dealing with was, they didn't have to deal with science notation and math notation, that sort of thing. Yeah.
So obviously, kind of people were very good as you were growing up. You didn't maybe encounter too many challenges there, from what you're saying, with regards to how people were with you. But what sort of impact did the sight loss have in general, maybe as you were growing up or in your schooling, or even choice of career? Did it have a significant impact, or was it something that kind of you learned at a young age to work with?
Well, it's a little both. If I were able to do exactly what I wanted to do, I would probably have gone into an experimental field of science. But there's so much, increasingly more and more. There's you know, theoretical science with computer applications, and so I chose something that's very similar to what I would have wanted to do.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, yeah. So did assistive technology kind of play quite a big part in all of that? What technology would have been available as you were kind of coming out of school, or actually maybe even using in school or in your career at the start?
Well, I can relate to what Maureen was saying about technology. I was also using typewriters to print some papers in college, for instance, and I actually avoided courses to do that. In retrospect, I probably should have put things in Braille and hired somebody to type it out for me. But I used Braille writers and tape recorders, and I would record classes, and it was a very tedious but an excellent way to learn when somebody was doing derivations in chemistry, physics or chemistry, and I would listen to the recording and take notes, and doing it very slowly was really a great help in learning. Although it would have been nice to have more modern note takers and digital recorders, that sort of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Would you say, since you started working with NASA, has there been any challenges, particularly there, related to your sight loss?
Well, I would say so. Increasingly, in the engineering department, there are a lot of tools and things that weren't accessible. And like in one company we wrote to, that we felt some things could have been accessible, and we didn't get any response from them at all. So it has sort of shaped, to some extent, what I do. I enjoy what I do, but I perhaps could have had a wider choice of ways I could have supported our branch. Had some of these specialized software tools been accessible. But things have. I would say in general, though, the culture, and I'm sure you see the same thing, just in the last 5 or 10 years, things have greatly improved. Yeah,
absolutely. And how would you say, just to kind of give us a bit of an idea here, would there be any particular things are more of a challenge? How do you deal with those challenges? Again, as throughout your career with NASA, people might maybe have a little bit of an idea in their mind, is such a big technological behemoth almost. It's it might be in our minds that you would be using to assistive technology. Is that the case, or would you would have used outside, or that you would use outside of NASA as well?
Well, I guess where things currently are, it's a pretty good situation. I've had a lot of learning to do this. Dealing with artificial intelligence, I'm by no means an expert in it. I don't have training in it, but I've done a lot of background reading, and of course using the web and searching for articles, and getting help from people, getting references to look at. It's been helpful. So at least with what I'm currently doing, there's not really too much that's difficult. Every once in a while you find websites and forms I need to fill out that aren't quite accessible. And of course that's where COVID changed things. It used to be I would just grab somebody a couple of offices away to click on a mouse, and now I'm having a technician remote into my computer and help me do it. So, but it's not real frequent that situation comes up.
Yeah. So I've just got a little bit of a bad line here. I'm not sure if I'm hearing all of your answer there, Craig. Apologies.
I apologize. I've noticed the same thing. It may be.
But go ahead.
Area here. No, continue though.
Yeah. So I was just some of it there, and maybe one of the guys can jump in as well if it might be my line that's an issue. So one of the guys might jump in a second if But I just heard you mentioning there about maybe someone would remote in onto your computer if need be for support. Would you use things like JAWS and kind of screen really would as well? I didn't quite catch that.
Yes, I use JAWS. I use a Braille display, and I've been using note takers. I just recently got an Braille that I'm still in the process of setting up. And I use an iPhone as well.
Great. I'm just going to come in here for a moment. This is JP here, Craig. I think Judith is having some broadband issues there. I'm sure he'll be back with us very shortly. But we did receive a question just a moment ago from someone who's listening in, and they've asked, could you tell us a little bit about the Space Camp for visually impaired students, as they believe you may be involved in that project?
Yes, it's a marvelous program. I have spoken to students there most years as they've held it. It gives people that attend the experience of what it's like to fly missions. Like, they have mock-ups of the shuttle, and I think they have updated to possibly some of the more future kinds of missions and things. But everything is provided in large print and Braille, and the workers are really dedicated with working with the students. I know the regular staff at the Space Camp loves that week when the students are there, because they said they feel that they learn so much and they appreciate working with the kids. It's an organization that is international. There are always students coming from the UK, then they've been from Ireland, other European countries. I think every year there are students from Australia, and they just have a marvelous organization for getting information out to, if it's important information regarding technology or education. It's a marvelous education for disseminating that knowledge.
Fantastic. Is there a way for people to find out more about the Space Camp? There's a website, perhaps.
I'm sure that there is. It's gosh, I'll have to send it to you. I think it's SBIZ. I can send something to you on
Excellent.
that. Just
great. We can share it with our listener. Thanks. Thank you. Excellent.
Yeah.
Very good.
You're back with us. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. That's it. Thanks for stepping in there, JP.
Yeah,
and
sure.
Really interesting to hear about that as well. I was just wondering, Craig, is it quite unusual with NASA for someone with sight loss to be working with NASA?
Well, there are probably 25 to 30 people that are visually impaired in some way, and of course, it's not all. There are a number of us that are in engineering or science, but there are people that do a lot of support roles. There are people that we had someone who I think retired recently. She was partially sighted that worked as a librarian. We had people that do secretarial work, people that have done work with small businesses, small business contracts, just human resources. People that are involved in purchasing.
That's actually brilliant to hear, just the variety of different roles there as well. Because I think sometimes it can seem like there are, even though there's a desire for everything to be accessible, it can feel like maybe there are some roles or some organizations where just somebody might have the impression that, well, that might be a ceiling on it almost. But it's nice to hear that there's so many with NASA.
Yes, and it's nice that that there are so many different roles that accommodate people with all kinds of interests.
Yeah, absolutely. We just had another question in there. Just somebody was asking, what was the most exciting project you've worked on, Craig?
Well, I guess it's two answers. I guess I can't think of any one project, but some of the work I did in chemistry I enjoyed, and I'm really enjoying now some of the work. While I'm not really doing the work, it's just some of the stuff, the artificial intelligence that people are developing is so interesting.
Yeah.
And there's so much to learn from that.
Yeah. And I guess that is such a broad thing as well, that it's always going to be quite interesting to see the different applications that you're able to kind of get from the developments in AI as well.
Yes, I think that's where I think that this may lead into one of the questions you sent. I think there's a lot of application for AI in the future for possibly assistive technology. I can imagine if there are certain kinds of graphs or charts that, ideally you want things very precisely programmed, but sometimes I think artificial intelligence could fill in some gaps that.
Absolutely.
While it may not be perfect, could fill in some gaps that clearly we don't have right now.
It's actually really good just to get that perspective as well, because obviously in your role in an organization which is right at the cutting edge of technological development, it gives you a certain kind of perspective on these things. And what sort of direction can you imagine assistive technology going in the next few years, or even kind of in a more aspirational way? What would you like to see it? What direction would you like to see it going?
Well, I think just with better pattern recognition and artificial intelligence, I think some of the, if somebody has different kinds of charts they're presenting, they're very graphical or very picturesque, I would think that rendering that into perhaps a text or could really be helpful. There's, I think it's kind of in an infancy, but I know there's a lot of work with trying to develop things in a more accessing information in a textual way.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, it'd be interesting to see some of those developments. It's been really good to just chat to you and just to get a little bit of an insight into your work with NASA as well, Craig, and a little bit of your background there as well. Appreciate you talking to us today about those things.
Well, thank you.
And we hope to have you back on the show maybe at some point as well. It'd be nice to talk to you again, catch up with you again at some point. So thank you very much for joining us on the show this week. That was Craig Moore from NASA, and we'll hold out hope that maybe our listenership will include someone on the International Space Station at some point. Craig, maybe you can put in a good word for us at some point. I think he's disappeared. Very good. So that was Craig Moore from NASA, and good to chat to him there. Just remember, if you want to listen back to that interview, you can do that on YouTube or on any of the major podcast platforms as well. And you'll have noticed that on YouTube particularly, a lot of the live events now have been broken down into different segments, so you'll be able to search for those individual segments or just listen to some of the individual segments of our shows as well. Very good. So how do you follow a NASA technician? Well, we're going to move on with the show, and we're going to go to our tech help section this week. And Daniel, you're going to have a lot to live up to here, but this week we have a query about what to do when two different screen readers are talking at the same time. Daniel, what advice could you give on that one?
Hi, Jude. Thanks very much. It's very hard to follow up on Craig's insight there. My gosh, what a job he has. Wouldn't you just love to be there, even just in the room and seeing how all that comes together? But it's lovely hearing from Craig, and thanks very much for that. Yes, so on to today's tech help. We've got a question in there, as you said. Somebody's got two screen readers installed on their computer. Let's say in this example we have NVDA going and we have JAWS going, and you might have a preference for one over the other, but perhaps after installing both of those screen reading softwares, that the two of them come in at the one time just after Windows starts up, can be a little bit disorientating or a little bit of a nuisance. So if you wanted to I suppose, let's say, take NVDA first of all. If you wanted to stop that loading automatically with Windows after your computer switches on, you can use the insert an N key to bring up the NVDA panel, and from there you navigate to Preferences and into the Settings, and in the General category, which should be the first one you land on, there are two checkboxes in there. One of them is to uncheck the option to start NVDA during the Windows login. So that comes up there before you maybe put in your password to gain access to Windows. Or alternatively, you can uncheck the Start NVDA after signing, or maybe you want to disable both of those. And at that point, then to exit out of NVDA, you use your Insert and Q key followed by Enter, and that shuts down the NVDA platform. Now, if it's JAWS you want to stop automatically starting up, bit of a tongue twister, that one. You use the Insert and J key command, and that brings you to your options and into the basics. And in there, you're going to have an automatically Start JAWS button. When you open that button, you're presented with an options to uncheck, again, checkboxes. You uncheck the Start JAWS at Windows login screen. And another interesting option that JAWS gives you here is if there's multiple users on your computer, let's say, right, you're sharing it with somebody else in the family or a flatmate or whatever, you can select JAWS to start after login for specific users. So you can pick them out of a list of a user, you know, if there's 2 or 3 user accounts on the Windows. Yeah. So that's a handy one to know. And also, maybe somebody is using the Windows Narrator, probably the poor relation of the 3. Your start and stop Narrator keystroke is Control and Windows key and Enter together, and that will start it. And obviously the same again will stop Windows Narrator from operating too. So there's the 3 options available for you if you want to stop those or start those accordingly.
Yeah, brilliant. So just can you just repeat again for us, just the keystrokes to get into the options for NVDA and then the keystroke to get into the options for JAWS?
Yeah, so insert an N, think of insert N for NVDA and insert an J for JAWS. That will get you into those options menu from there.
Brilliant. Really helpful. Thank you very much for taking us through that, Daniel. And yeah, I can imagine that if somebody was having that problem, that would be such a frustrating thing to have the 2 voices coming on.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I could imagine everything being announced twice and you're head melt. So that's a little way around that. Hopefully it has helped out somebody who might be in that little bit of a predicament at the moment.
Yeah. Hopefully prevent a few migraines anyway. Thanks very much for that, Daniel.
You're more than welcome.
Very good. So now we're going to move on with our quick tips for this week. And JP, we have more tips in relation to voiceover and talkback.
That's right, we do indeed, Jude. So for this week, I thought we'd go through some of the different reading gestures that we can use with voiceover on an iPhone or on an iPad, and with talkback on an Android device. So depending on whatever your preference might be. Yeah. So these would be gestures that we could use, for example, when we want to know which apps that we have on our home screen on our phone or on our tablet device. If we want to read content on an app or maybe read content on a website that we're browsing. So as I mentioned a few weeks ago, with both VoiceOver and with Talkback, we can swipe left or right with one finger to read the previous or next item. And another option is to use what's called Explore by Touch, where we move one finger around the screen to hear which items are on it. But as it happens, these are actually pretty much the only reading gestures that VoiceOver and Talkback have in common, because the rest of them are actually very different. So to start off with VoiceOver, we can use a 2-finger swipe up to read all content on a page, or we can use a 2-finger swipe down to start reading continuously from one point onwards. So this might be a useful gesture if, like, for example, we want to read an article on a web page that we've come across, but without having to read some of maybe the menu items that appear on the very top of the web page. And also with VoiceOver, what we can do is we can tap the screen with 2 fingers to both pause and resume reading. So start, pause and resume reading with a 2-finger tap of the screen. So these are some of the reading gestures we can use with VoiceOver. But as I mentioned, the reading gestures with Talkback are actually a little bit different. And for starters, to start reading from the top of the page with Talkback, or to start reading continuously from one point onwards, what we need to do is we need to use what's called the global context menu. And to open the global context menu, what we need to do is swipe down the screen with one finger and then immediately to the right. So it's all one movement, down and then to the right. It's almost like we're drawing like an L shape on the screen. Yeah. And then when we do this, a menu appears, the global context menu, and we can swipe right or left and we can explore this menu. And we can find 2 options here in the global context menu. One is read from top, and another is read from next item. So depending on which one we want, we can double tap the screen with one finger and choose that to read from the top of the page downwards or read from an item downwards. And finally, to stop Talkback reading, we can tap the screen with one finger. So it's a one finger tap of the screen to stop Talkback screen reader on your Android device. So it's a quick run through some of the different reading gestures that we can use with Talkback. Sorry, beg your pardon, with VoiceOver rather on an iPhone or with Talkback on an Android device. And most of them, actually, as we can see, are actually quite different.
Yeah. Good to get the clarity as well of which ones you can kind of use on both devices as well. Exactly. Just have that clarity. Really helpful. Thank you very much for that, JP.
Nice one. Okay, Jude. Very
good. And I think just before we finish, we have a bit of information for you on the Space Camp for visually impaired students, as mentioned earlier. Daniel, you have that.
Yeah. Just to follow up on Craig, he was telling us there that some camps are led in the United States, their Space Camp. So the website for anybody that might be interested in following up and learning a little bit more about that is scivis.org. So that's scivis.org. So if anybody is interested, maybe find out a little bit more about that, that's their website where they have all the information there. And from looking at it, it seems to be quite an accessible website too. So well done, guys, on that one.
Brilliant, very good. And thanks for coming back to us with that information as well, Daniel. So a really interesting show today, but of course we've got more to come in the coming weeks. We'll talk about that in just a second, what's coming up in future weeks. But just a reminder again that if you want a bit more of a hand with any technology, really, you can get support from the Labs team from 9 to 5, Monday to Friday on 1850 92 30 60. That's 1850 92 30 60. Or you can email labs@ncbi.ie, or you can contact NCBI services on 1850 33 43 53. That's 1850 33 43 53, or you can email info@ncbi.ie. And if you'd like to make a donation to support our services, you can visit donate.ncbi.ie, and maybe you'd even like to sponsor one of our live events. Well, you can do that as well by contacting labs@ncbi.ie. And that can help to keep our live events going. Just imagine you could have your name associated with NASA even in a live event like today, for example. So if you want to do that, just get in touch at labs@ncbi.ie. So just before we go, just a reminder of what we'll be talking about in future live events. We're going to be talking to Sky about their accessibility features, and as we mentioned last week, that'll be quite an interesting discussion, so please do tune in to that. You'll get the notification on that when the newsletter is sent out on the Sky one and their accessibility features. That'll be mentioned in the newsletter. We're going to also be looking at the new show and tell feature and Alexa as well. We'll be doing that in the next few weeks too. A really useful feature there that'll be good to just test out and just talk about as well on our live event. Another thing that we really want to tell you about actually in the coming weeks as well, the new NCBI website is up and running, and actually there's an awful lot of new features in the new NCBI website. So we think you're going to be very happy with some of the additional features that are available there. Fully accessible website, of course, and we're going to be just talking about some of those extra features, some of the new elements that are involved in that website. In probably one of the next 2 weeks, we'll be talking about our new NCBI website. So quite a lot coming up in the coming weeks. Just a reminder that our next show is next Tuesday, so that's March 9th, and that's the usual time of 2:30 p.m. And if you want to stay up to date with what's happening on our live events, as well as plenty more, you can subscribe to our newsletter on our website, or you can email us at labs@ncbi.ie if you'd like to do that. It's very useful to be able to get a lot of the technical information is on the technology newsletter, some really interesting news as well, but also information on upcoming live events. So do sign up to our technology newsletter and stay informed of what's happening. So all that's left for me to do today is to thank our panel today. Really good to talk to Maureen Lanigan and to Craig Moore as well. And of course, thanks to everyone listening in as well. And from me, Jude Marr, and from JP Corcoran, Daniel Dunn and Sean Doran, goodbye for now, and we look forward to having you all back with us next week for another NCBI Labs live event.